Well, Carol, I'm just delighted that we're able to have a little coffee talk this morning about some of your adventures. I was so intrigued when you told me last week that Abbot Pennings was the presider at your mother's wedding twice.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Let's talk about that a little bit.
Right. In 1924, my mother, Maud Sadi, I think it was pronounced Sadi, and my father, George, was married at St. Joseph's.
Your dad is George?
Right.
All right, we love this.
At St. Joseph's Church, and Father Abbot Pennings, of course, presided.
Is that so?
Right. But then my father died when I was just a baby. I was 9 months old.
Oh.
So I never knew him. So Mother was a widow for at least 11 years.
She was,
yeah. But then she remarried, and Father Abbot Pennings presided again. So we have two dates, 1924 and 1944.
Oh, how fine.
Yeah.
That's right. Both at Old St. Joe's?
Both at St. Joseph's Church.
Do you have pictures?
Oh, yes. Sure.
I would like to see those.
Okay.
Yeah, see what the church looked like in those days.
Oh, yeah. Well, it was the National Shrine of St. Joseph.
Indeed it was.
Sure.
That's right.
Is it still, of course, it went to the Abbey, didn't it?
It did, and now it's returned, and we just received the apostolic declaration that, in fact, it is now the shrine of St. Joseph.
Okay.
So, indeed. Now, you might remember that, your mother's second
yes.
marriage. Yes.
Oh, yes.
Right.
Yeah, I was 12.
Ah. So you had impressions of the abbot then, I should think.
Oh, yes. Well, when I was 5, my mother took me to St. Joseph Grade School to register me for first grade. The nun wasn't too happy, though, because she already had quite a few, students.
Well, there's a problem to have too many, right?
And she said, Carol is too young. She won't be 6 until November. So Mother took me by the hand, and we walked across the street to the Abbey, and she spoke to Father Abbot.
Good for her. She went right to the top.
Right. And Father Abbot took me by the hand, and with Mom, we crossed the street back to the school.
Is that right?
Sister wasn't too happy, I'm afraid. But she had to accept me as a first grader. And no matter what I did all year round, no matter how hard I worked, she only gave me B's. Every subject. The whole report card is just B's. But then I had her for the second grade. And she relented, and I got my A's.
There you are. That's right. Well, I think B stands for beloved, right? That's how I would interpret that. Fine.
Well, Father also prepared us for First Holy Communion, as well as the nuns. So we would line up along the communion railing, and Father Abbot would take out his jackknife and show us how to put out our tongue, and he would put the blade on our tongue to show us how to receive the sacred host. And I don't remember whether he used a handkerchief or if he wiped the blade on his vestment, but we weren't too concerned about germs, evidently. But that's how I learned how to receive Holy Communion.
And this would be the very first time I've heard that story.
Really?
And I cannot wait to retell it. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Is that well? That's a very vivid memory. I don't know that I would forget that either.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, curious.
Well, we went to Mass every single day.
You did?
At St. Joseph's School, the school days.
Sure.
And the fratres would sing their Gregorian chant up in the choir loft. And we were down below, and during Mass, we recited the Rosary out loud.
Is that so?
From the beginning of the Mass right up to the communion time. Very unusual. I don't think they've ever done that since, or any other, unless other schools did that too.
I have a vague recollection that might have been a pious practice in other schools as well, but you're the first person to authenticate that practice occurring here, so thank you for that. That's very important to remember and to think about.
Yes.
About how the liturgy has evolved and matured and changed and adapted.
I loved hearing the fratres singing the Gregorian chant.
I would think that would be very, very memorable
it
too.
was.
Particularly because you might not have seen them, because if they're up in the choir loft,
behind us, right?
and literally behind you, and these voices wafting down there, that must have been very, very beautiful, right? So
Well,
in the midst of all this,
yes.
these other things, beauty still permeates
Right.
the space. Yeah, all right, good.
Well, one day during Mass, Father Abbot had just distributed Holy Communion, and he was on his way back up the altar steps, and he stumbled.
Did he?
I was just in awe and shocked. Some of the fratres came down, and when Father Abbot had stumbled, the sacred hosts fell out of the ciborium,
Oh,
and they were on the steps. The fratres came, and they put the sacred host back in the ciborium, and where the host was, they put holy oil. And then they put a little piece of white cloth on that spot. I remember it so vividly because there were all these little white pieces of cloth. So I never forgot that. Yeah, Father must have been so embarrassed. We all felt so sorry for him.
evidence of very profound Eucharistic piety, I would think, that sort of reverence for the Blessed Sacrament.
Right.
And yes. Well, I've seen occurrences that are similar to that over the course of my own lifetime here, but none quite as vividly described as you remember, which I think is very touching and very, very powerful.
Yeah.
To recognize that the Church was so especially mindful and would have an immediate protocol for something like that in the event of an accident. So that's as memorable as some of these other stories already. Yeah, well, they've left an impression on you, clearly.
Oh, yes. When I was in grade school, I used to ask a lot of questions. And sometimes the nun would say, well, Father Abbot Pennings is coming over for religion class, which he did once a week.
You did.
He would walk across the street, and Father Burke would have his arm, kind of supporting him. I thought he was old then, because this was in the early 40s.
Now, I have to imagine what this looks like. Father Burke was known as 7 feet of Ireland. And then Abbot Pennings, I have the impression, might have been
Smaller, shorter.
Yes, a bit shorter. So that must have been a curious sight, the two of them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
right.
Father Burke would walk with him.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah. So I'll tell you a few of the questions that I asked. I said to Sister, could I ask Father a question about my girlfriend? And she said, oh, okay, when Father Abbot comes, you ask him. So Father Abbot came into the classroom, and I said, Father, I have a girlfriend she's in Catholic. Will she go to heaven? And Father Abbot came over to me, put his hands on my shoulders, and looked me in the eye, and he said, if your friend was baptized and was a good little girl, she'll go to heaven just like any Catholic girl. And I thought, wow, I was so relieved. And years went by. I stayed a friend, a good friend. However, we were both adults, and she had moved to a different state.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So I visited her.
Did you?
And we sat in a restaurant, and I told her this episode.
Is that right?
She laughed so hard. And she said, Carol, I married the most wonderful man, and I am now a Catholic.
Is that so? Oh, my. There it is.
So it was a good ending to that, to that story. Another time, Sister was telling the class that January 1st was the feast of the Circumcision, and it was a holy day. And I said, Sister, what's circumcision? And she never did tell me. And she didn't tell me to ask Father either. So I never did find out that day.
I don't know that I'm prepared to answer that question today either. So.
No, it isn't called that anymore.
No, it's not. Yeah, mercifully. It's, yeah.
Right. They changed it. Maybe that was the reason they changed it.
The Feast of the Holy Family.
Yeah. Then another time when Father came into the classroom, I asked him, I noticed that the priest receives the sacred host and drinks the sacred wine from the chalice, but we only receive the sacred host. Why?
You're especially observant. Very good.
And, he said, he tried to explain to me that when you receive the sacred host, you are receiving the body and blood of Christ. So it isn't really real necessary to receive the sacred wine. So I had to accept that as my answer.
An affirmation.
An affirmation.
An affirmation. I have to ask you this because I've only heard this as, a thought or as somebody else's memory, but not from the person themselves. Did Abbot Pennings come to the school and release the children for a free day?
Oh, I don't remember that.
This I hear from many people was his practice, but I've never heard anyone confirm that. So you don't remember that he would come in and say, it's such a lovely day. I think perhaps all the students should go out and play.
Oh.
All right, so
I don't remember that.
I think that you might remember that if it were true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be hard to
he
forget.
might have done that. He was a very kind person.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all loved him. Well, my mother, before her second marriage, she was a widow. And, of course, when my father died, it was way before Social Security or widow's pension.
Oh, right.
So we really were hard up, and she didn't have much money. So she was very concerned with the fact that when the collection box went around, or the collection basket at church, that she didn't have much money.
Oh, right.
So she went to Father Abbot to apologize and tell him that she was so sorry that all she could afford was 10 cents every Sunday. And Father Abbot was just so kind and considerate, and he said, that is just plenty. And that just reminds me of, I think it was just last Sunday.
The gospel.
The gospel of the poor widow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's what reminded me when I was preparing this information for you. So.
Well, that's the truth of Scripture then,
Yeah.
ever ancient, ever new, that
Right.
those narratives are our narratives,
Yeah.
yesterday, today, and tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so that's a
Mother
an
was so
affirmation of that.
relieved. Yeah.
Yes, well,
It was hard, yeah.
her consideration is such a virtue in itself, her
Right.
mindfulness of that. Did you live in the neighborhood here?
Oh, sure. Now, you know where, it was former St. Boniface Church.
Sure, of course. Yeah.
Dudley Burter Hall.
Mm-hmm.
Well, kitty corner in that vacant lot was the neighborhood grocery store. And we lived up above.
I did not know this.
Oh, yes. The neighborhood grocery store.
Is that so?
And I lived up above. So every time I go by that, that vacant lot, I think of my childhood.
Well, this is what I'm going to think about, that there was a grocery store there.
It was a grocery store called the Neighborhood Grocery Store.
Is that so?
Sure.
Wow.
And when you bought sweet rolls, you got 13. You got a baker's dozen.
Yeah. So
and they were 2 for a nickel.
Is that right? Is that right? Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. I have many memories. Sure.
So you would walk to school?
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Yes. One time I walked when it was a blizzard, and Mother didn't realize, I don't know if she didn't use the radio or what, but she didn't realize that there was no school. And I walked, and I had a hardest time, and I finally got to the classroom, and the sister said, "What are you doing here?"
Oh, no.
So I helped her for the rest of the morning.
Oh, there you are. There you are.
She put me to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have uniforms? Did you have to wear uniforms
No.
at that? Oh, there were
No.
no uniforms.
No
now,
uniforms.
there's a surprise. I bet many people would not have known that.
Yeah.
Is that right?
And you know how many children today, when they receive First Holy Communion, the little girls will wear white?
Sure.
Well, it was during the war years, and we were just told to wear our Sunday best.
Is that right? Now, there's the practicality of that I think is so exemplary and wonderful.
Yeah.
All right, I'm thinking differently about so many things, hearing this version of the history, which I think is so beautiful, really.
Yeah.
Now, you attended the college here, yes?
Yes.
So you attended the grade school here, and where'd you go to high school?
I went to high school. I started at the academy.
Awesome.
And then that's when my mother got married. And we moved to let's see, first it was to Green Bay for a couple of years, and then I ended up at Seymour High School.
Oh,
I
Seymour.
had to finish there.
But then you came back home to St. Norbert's.
When I married Howie, sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, could you tell us a little bit about that? Because you had, this was a bit of an odyssey, a bit of an adventure to come to St. Norbert at the time.
Right.
That you did as a young woman.
Yeah. Howie had 3 children. His wife had died of cancer.
Oh.
And so when I married him, I married a widower with 3 children, a ready-made family.
Yes. Yeah.
And then we had 2 more children. And Howie was getting sick.
Oh.
He died very young, but before he died, the 3.5 years of cancer, he said, Carol, I think you should go back to college.
Is that right?
Because at that time, when I first started at St. Norbert's, you only needed 1 or 2 years to teach, 1 or 2 years of college. But 1964, they changed that, and you had to have your bachelor's degree. So then Howie told me, you better go back, because we had found out in 63 that he had cancer. So he said, why don't you go back and get your degree? So he encouraged me. And then after I got my degree, then he encouraged me to get my master's. But St. Norbert's didn't have a master's program at that time. So then I ended up at UWGB.
You were here at a time where there were significantly fewer women studying on campus, I believe. Is that true?
1 to 7.
1 to 7 was the ratio.
That was the ratio.
Is that right?
It was great, except I was already married.
True. And then, of course, you wouldn't have lived in a dormitory or residence hall. There, you're home with your own children.
Right.
And so they saw mom studying.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, there's some
yes.
positive role modeling.
I'm trying to think which priest, Father Calavecchio.
Oh yeah, Xavier.
Father Calavecchio made sure that I had all my classes when my children were in school.
Oh, fine.
He was just great, to register me for classes so that I wouldn't have to be away from my children. So it worked out.
Priorities in order.
Yeah.
Yes, wonderful.
Father Calavecchio. I don't know how I happened to remember that name.
Isn't that wonderful?
I
It
know
just comes out of the blue.
It just came, yeah, right.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Now, because you taught, yes?
Yes.
How many B's did you give people? Recalling your own experience of B after B after B.
I have all my report cards.
Do you? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
And I know the sister's name, but I didn't want to say it.
No.
I
Of
didn't
course,
want to
yeah. It's very
because
discreet.
she was a young nun and she was very good. She was a good teacher.
Sure, of course.
But I didn't want to make any disparaging remarks about her because she was young and she did have a lot of students.
That's right.
Of course, I had 52 my first year of teaching.
And where was that?
52 children. It was at Sacred Heart in Manitowoc.
Is that so?
Yes, I had 52 first graders.
I don't know that I could remember 52 names.
52 first graders. I don't know how I did it.
But you did.
I did.
Oh,
I told the children, if you're good, I will tell you a story. And I'll read you a story. And you can choose one of the books, and then I'll choose the other. And they loved the story of the biggest bear and Make Way for Ducklings and Ferdinand.
The bull.
Yes.
Yes, I remember that story myself.
You remember it?
Sure, yeah. But it's not because I was good in school. I mean, I must have heard it some other time.
Yeah. But it worked, and the children, you should see. Can you picture me sitting and all these children sitting around?
I can see it.
And then I told the book, but it worked.
Of course, yeah.
But I didn't
we
really
love
have
them.
too many discipline problems. I had one little autistic girl, and she didn't really talk until way after Christmas. But it came out. She did do well.
Oh, I'm so glad.
But, yeah. But I don't recall any big discipline problems. I think teachers have a few more problems that we didn't have back then.
There are many challenges for sure.
Right.
Yeah, but it's a
Right.
grace vocation,
Yeah.
and we're always learning. And
Yeah, but 52. Now when I think of it. But then when I taught in the country school, I had 38, all 8 grades.
my goodness.
So that was a challenge right there.
Absolutely. Well,
You should have
prepared
seen
for
my
life.
lesson plans. Yeah.
So you've seen this campus completely change before your eyes.
Oh, yes, because the only buildings that were here were Boyle Hall, Union,
Main hall.
and there was a big Quonset hut. And I remember during the Second World War coming, and we sang When Johnny Comes Marching Home and The White Cliffs of Dover.
Oh, is that right? Some of the war songs.
Yeah, the war songs. I wonder, was there any other? Of course, the Abbey was there and the church.
Main hall, perhaps?
Yeah, Maine.
Mm-hmm.
Maine and Boyle.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there was any
This
other
was
building.
it was a neighborhood,
Yeah.
right? With a grocery store in the corner.
Sure. And
Yeah.
Grant Street, of course, went all the way up past the school.
Sure it
Sure,
would.
and then that was closed off, with the Bemis Center and
So some of today's sidewalks were once roads
right.
through here. Yeah,
Right.
and very
Yeah.
few houses left.
Right.
Although if we
Yeah.
move down a
Yeah.
little bit here on 3rd Street, we might see some.
Yeah.
That might have been at the time.
There
we
was
were
the
still here.
Willems floral
I
shop.
remember that.
Do
I
you
remember that in
really?
the 80s. Sure. The
Oh,
little
my
greenhouse
gosh.
was there as
Sure.
well.
And
yes, right behind what's formerly the Crest, or what's now the Crescent.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember that. I think it's a good thing to have a flower shop close to a campus.
Right.
Right. It inspires all sorts of thoughts.
Yeah.
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 Oh, wonderful. Anything else about Abbot Pennings I'm wondering here? He must have had an accent, do you recall? A Dutch accent on?
But it was hard. We really had to listen because he didn't project
Oh, he did
real
not.
loudly.
All right.
And we really had to listen when he came to class. I remember that.
So as I'm thinking about this jackknife that
Right.
the abbot had, I'm wondering if that might be connected to the fact that he enjoyed a cigar. Almost every day, I think he enjoyed a cigar. And I wonder if that knife wasn't used in trimming that cigar, if there might be a connection there, why he would be carrying one with him. I wonder
Right.
if that wouldn't be the...
I was wondering too why a priest would be carrying a jackknife.
I bet it was
Yeah.
for the cigar. And of course, you mentioned cigar here, who is very, very famous. Legend has it for keeping the school and the parish's finances in a cigar box.
Oh my!
And so that's how I understand finances. I need everything in one box. Show me the money, and there it is. I don't know that we have such a cigar box in our archives, but it makes me want to look a little bit to not only find that jackknife, but to wonder about the cigar box as well. So there could be a mystery solved. This is going to be an ongoing investigation. I'll be sure and let you know what I
what you find out.
Right. We'll do some sleuthing around. And,
Okay, but we never saw him smoking the cigars.
now,
He
promoting
didn't.
a good example.
Right.
Right. So that I like as well. So wonderful. I knew this was going to be a good conversation. I didn't expect it to be as rich as this. So thank you
You're
so much for
welcome.
sharing this. This means a lot.
Thank you.
Personally, but
Yeah, I'm so glad
comes
to
to get
share
to
it
the
because
school.
otherwise, nobody would know all the different things that Father Abbot did.
And
Yeah.
we're grateful
Yeah.
for that perspective and that
Yes.
memory.
Yeah.
And he becomes a role model for all of us
Yeah,
this way.
and didn't he come over to quell some heresy up in Door County?
He did.
Yeah.
He did. Yeah.
And that was the main purpose, I believe, for him coming over?
It certainly contributed to his arrival here. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And he was able to speak the language, and that, of course, helped. And I should think that he was as kind and gently persuasive as he might have been to Sister in receiving one more into the classroom. So that's how I'd like to remember that. But yeah, you're absolutely correct.
Yeah.
And then found a situation here at the church that was in need of a leader.
Right.
And
Yeah.
boy, the rest, as they say, is history, huh?
Sure.
Where were you in 1969 when the church, Old St. Joseph Church?
I was in Green Bay. I was married.
That church went through some very dramatic changes in the interior.
Oh, yes. In a way, I was sad. But it is nice now.
Well, it's
But,
beautiful now, I think.
Yeah,
Yes,
it is.
yes,
It is.
yes.
But that church the altar was so ornate.
The photographs were magnificent,
Right,
yes, and there are little
right.
relics of it that still exist, parts of it. after they were removed from the church, neighbors would collect them, right, and kept them. And then when the church was being reconsidered, 20 years ago, some of those treasures were shared back with the church. And what's the altar today was the former pulpit. And so where Abbot Pennings would have preached is now the altar.
Sure.
And so there is that living connection there, which I think is so curious. Well, I'm going to be on the lookout for that jackknife of his to see if that's not in the archives here. I want to see that because I was not prepared to hear that story.
I know it. When you think of it, I mean, he could have cut somebody.
Yeah, well, yeah.
When I think
we don't do that today, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that is
and
not
then,
done today.
and I remember him, but I'm pretty sure I remember him doing that on his vestment to clean, and then just going to the next little child at the communion railing.
We so don't do that today, right? Yeah. Right. Well, thanks so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
This is a true
great.
joy. We really
Good.
appreciate it so
Good.
much.
Okay.
Yes.